The knock came at 3:17 the morning. Not loud, not demanding, just three soft taps on the steel door of the Hells Angels clubhouse. The kind of sound that shouldn't wake anyone, but somehow cuts through everything else like a whisper in a storm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the low murmur of late-night conversations. Brothers nursing beers, sharing road stories, the usual Friday night ritual that kept them sane between rides. But when that knock came, every voice in the room went quiet. Rocky Bear, Morrison, club president, looked up from his pool cue. 20 years wearing the patch, 20 years of handling everything from bar fights to federal raids, and he'd never heard a knock like that. Hesitant, scared, small, he walked to the door, heavy boots echoing on concrete. When he opened it, he looked down into the face of a boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Pajamas torn, feet bare, cheeks swollen purple in the porch light. The boy looked up with eyes too old for his face and whispered words that would change everything. "My dad's hurting my mom again. Please. Someone said you guys protect people." Before we dive deeper into this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. We love hearing from our brotherhood around the world. The child's name was Marcus Thompson, though he'd never told anyone that before tonight. 7 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that stuck up in places where sleep and fear had tangled it. He stood there, shivering, not from cold, but from the kind of terror that lives in a house where love turned to violence. Behind him, 3 blocks away, stood a modest 2-story house with yellowed windows and a front yard that had given up trying to grow grass. Inside that house, his mother Sarah lay on the kitchen floor, her lips split, her ribs aching from where her husband's fist had found them again. She didn't know Marcus had slipped out through his bedroom window. She didn't know he'd run barefoot through the night to find help. But Marcus knew things a 7-year-old shouldn't know. He knew the sound his father's footsteps made when the drinking had gone too far. He knew which floorboards creaked and how to avoid them. He knew that when his father's voice got quiet instead of loud, that's when the real danger started. Tonight had been different, though. Tonight, when his father grabbed his mother by the hair and slammed her against the refrigerator, Marcus had heard something break. Not just dishes this time. Something inside his mother. The way she fell and didn't get back up. The way she made a sound like a herd animal. That's when Marcus remembered something his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had whispered to him 2 weeks ago when she'd seen the finger-shaped bruises on his arm. Sometimes, she'd said, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear, the scariest-looking people can be the safest ones to ask for help. There's a clubhouse on Maple Street. If you're ever really scared, really in trouble, go there. Tell them a teacher sent you. Mrs. Patterson knew because her brother Danny rode with the Angels. She'd seen how they protected their own, how they handled men who hurt women and children. It wasn't legal justice, but it was the kind of justice that actually worked. So Marcus had climbed out his window, dropped 6 feet to the ground, and run through the empty streets in his Superman pajamas. Past the closed gas station, past the 24-hour laundromat with its flickering neon sign, past 3 police cars that never seemed to be around when his mother needed them. The Hells Angels clubhouse wasn't what most people imagined. It was a converted garage on the edge of town, painted black with red trim. The windows were barred, but not to keep people out, to keep the wrong kind of attention from looking in. Outside, a dozen Harley-Davidsons sat in perfect formation, chrome gleaming under the streetlight like sleeping dragons. Bear Morrison wasn't what most people imagined either. 45 years old, 6'4", built like a linebacker gone to seed, with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and arms covered in tattoos that told the story of a life lived hard. His real name was Robert, but nobody had called him that since high school. He'd earned the nickname Bear during his 3rd tour in Afghanistan, when he'd carried 2 wounded Marines through a minefield on his back. He'd come home to find his wife gone and his daughter grown up without him. The Marines didn't want him any more too many questions. too many nights waking up screaming. The Hells Angels gave him something the Marines never could. A family that didn't abandon you when you came back broken. Now he stood in the doorway, looking down at a 49 boy who reminded him of every child he'd failed to protect overseas. The purple bruise on Marcus's cheek was fresh, maybe an hour old. His torn pajama top revealed finger marks on his thin shoulders. "Son," Bear said softly, his voice rough as gravel but gentle as he could make it. "How'd you get that mark on your face?" Marcus touched his cheek unconsciously. "I tried to stop him," he whispered. "When he was hurting, Mama. But I'm too little." The words hit Bear like a physical blow. Behind him, the other brothers had moved closer. Snake, the vice president, a wiry man with prison tattoos and eyes that missed nothing. Diesel, the enforcer, who'd earned his name by once dragging a wife-beater behind his motorcycle for 3 blocks. Preacher, the club chaplain, who'd found God in a jail cell and never let go. They'd all heard the boy's words. They'd all seen the bruises. And something passed between them in that moment, a understanding that needed no words. "What's your name, little man?" Bear asked, kneeling down so he could look Marcus in the eye. "Marcus Thompson. I live on Elm Street, the blue house with the broken fence." Bear knew the house. He'd driven past it 100 times. Nice neighborhood, quiet street, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business and called the police instead of getting involved. The kind of place where a woman could scream and nobody would hear. "Marcus," Bear said carefully, "where's your mama right now?" "At home. On the kitchen floor. She won't get up." The boy's voice cracked. "I think you really hurt her this time. I think she might be dying." The silence that followed was deafening. In the clubhouse behind them, cigarettes burned forgotten in ashtrays. Beer grew warm in untouched bottles. Because every man in that room knew what they were looking at. A child standing on the edge of becoming an orphan, and a choice that would define who they really were. Bear's jaw tightened as he processed what the boy had told him. Sarah Thompson. He knew that name, though he'd never connected it to the quiet woman he sometimes saw at the grocery store, always wearing long sleeves even in summer, always keeping her head down. "Marcus," Bear said, still kneeling, "I need you to tell me about your dad." "What's his name?" "Derek Thompson. He works at the steel plant. He's really big. Bigger than you, I think. And when he drinks, he gets mean. Mama says he wasn't always like this, but I don't remember him being nice." Derek Thompson. Bear's expression darkened. He knew that name too. Thompson was a supervisor at the plant, known for his temper, his drinking, and his habit of firing anyone who looked at him wrong. 6'6", maybe 280 pounds of mean drunk. The kind of man who used his size to intimidate everyone around him. "Has he hurt you before tonight?" Bear asked gently. Marcus nodded, rolling up the sleeve of his torn pajama top to reveal old bruises in various stages of healing. Yellow-green ones that were weeks old, purple-black ones that were recent. "He says I'm too loud. Says boys should be seen and not heard. But sometimes I'm not even making noise, and he still gets mad." Snake stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled rage. At 52, he was the oldest member of the club, a Vietnam veteran who'd seen enough violence to last 3 lifetimes. But violence against children was where he drew the line in blood. "Bear," Snake said quietly, "we need to move. Now." "I know." Bear stood up, his mind already working through the logistics. "Marcus, I'm going to ask you to do something brave. Can you take us to your house and show us where your mama is?" The boy's eyes widened with fear. "But what if Dad sees us? What if he hurts her more?" "Son," Bear said, placing a massive hand on Marcus's shoulder, "your daddy's not going to hurt anyone ever again. I promise you that." There was something in Bear's voice, a certainty, a finality that made Marcus believe him. He nodded slowly. "Good boy. Snake, get the others. Full colors, full club. Diesel, bring the truck. This isn't a job for bikes." As the Brotherhood mobilized around them, Bear knelt down next to Marcus again. "I need you to understand something. What we're about to do, it's not because we like fighting. It's because sometimes fighting is the only way to protect people who can't protect themselves. Your mama can't fight back. You can't fight back. But we can. Are you going to kill him? Marcus asked, his voice small but steady. The question hung in the air like smoke. Bear looked into the boy's eyes and saw not fear, but hope. The kind of hope that comes when you've run out of every other option. No, son, we're not killers. But we're going to make sure he never hurts you or your mama again. Can you live with that? Marcus nodded without hesitation. Yes, sir. Within 10 minutes, the clubhouse had transformed into a military operation. The Hells Angels weren't just a motorcycle club, they were a brotherhood forged in combat. Men who'd served in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the streets of America's cities. They knew how to plan, how to execute, and how to protect their own. Diesel brought the truck around a black Chevy Silverado with tinted windows and a bed full of tools that weren't designed for construction work. Snake coordinated with the other chapters in nearby towns. Word went out on the radio. Family in trouble. All hands. No questions. Preacher, a former Marine chaplain who'd lost his faith in God but found it again in the Brotherhood, gathered the men in a circle. Brothers, he said, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. Tonight we're not just Hell's Angels. Tonight we're guardian angels. Let's ride. But they didn't ride. They drove. Because motorcycles draw attention, and attention was the last thing they needed tonight. The truck rolled through the quiet streets of the suburban neighborhood, its engine purring like a facing predator on the hunt. Marcus sat in the front seat between Bear and Snake, directing them turn by turn toward the house he'd fled an hour earlier. As they got closer, his breathing became more rapid, his small hands clenching and unclenching in his lap. You're doing good, Marcus, Bear said softly. Almost there now. They turned onto Elm Street, and Marcus pointed to a blue house halfway down the block. The porch light was off, but through the kitchen window, they could see the harsh glare of fluorescent lighting. And sprawled on the floor, visible through the window, was a woman who wasn't moving. There, Marcus whispered, "That's Mama." Bear's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the back of the truck, 8 other Hells Angels checked their gear and prepared for what was coming. They weren't going in to hurt Derek Thompson, though that would have been satisfying. They were going in to save a family. Marcus, Bear said, parking the truck 2 houses down, I want you to stay right here with Snake. Don't get out, don't move, no matter what you hear. Can you do that for me? The boy nodded, though his eyes were fixed on the house where his mother lay motionless. I'm going to bring her out to you, Bear continued. And then we're going to have a conversation with your father about how real men treat their families. As Bear and 6 other angels approached the house, moving with the silent precision of soldiers, Marcus watched from the truck window. For the first time in his young life, he felt something he'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that someone stronger than his father was coming to protect him. Inside the house, Derek Thompson was passed out in his recliner, a bottle of whiskey empty beside him, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. The front door of the Thompson house was unlocked. It always was. Derek's arrogance made him believe that no one in this quiet neighborhood would dare challenge him. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Bear tested the door handle and found it turned easily. He held up his hand, signaling the others to wait. Through the gap, he could see into the living room. Derek Thompson sat slumped in a leather recliner, snoring loudly, an empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the floor beside him. The man was even bigger than Marcus, had described a mountain of flesh and bad intentions. But Bear's attention wasn't on Derek. It was on the kitchen, where Sarah Thompson lay crumpled beside the refrigerator. Even from a distance, he could see she was breathing, but barely. Her face was swollen beyond recognition. Her left arm bent at an unnatural angle. Bear turned to his brothers and held up 2 fingers, then pointed toward the kitchen. Diesel and Tank, the club's medics, both former Army medics who'd patched up more wounded soldiers than they cared to remember, nodded and moved toward the back door. The plan was simple. Secure the victim, control the threat, send the blank message. They'd done variations of this dance before, though never with a 7-year-old witness sitting in their truck. Bear eased the front door open and stepped inside. The house smelled of stale beer, cigarettes, and something else, fear. It was embedded in the walls, soaked into the carpet, hanging in the air like invisible poison. This wasn't the first time violence had visited this house. It was just going to be the last. Derek didn't wake up as Bear and two other angels moved through the living room. He didn't wake up when Diesel and Tank entered through the back door and knelt beside Sarah Thompson. He didn't wake up until Bear's massive hand clamped down on his shoulder and shook him like a rag doll. "Wake up, hero," Bear said softly. Derek's eyes snapped open, bloodshot and confused. For a moment, he didn't understand what he was seeing. A massive man in black leather, death's head patches gleaming in the lamplight, standing over him like an angel of judgment. "What? Who are you? How did you get in my house?" "Name's Bear, and I'm here about your wife and kid." Derek's confusion began to clear, replaced by the mean drunk's instinctive aggression. "My family's none of your damn business. Get out of my house before I call the cops." Bear's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. "The cops? Son, you're about to wish the cops had gotten here first." That's when Derek noticed the other men. They'd materialized from the shadows like nightmares made real. Black leather, death's head patches, faces that had seen too much and forgotten how to show mercy. And in his kitchen, he could see two more kneeling beside his wife, checking her pulse, examining her injuries with professional efficiency. "Sarah!" Derek tried to stand up, but Bear's hand on his shoulder kept him pinned to the chair. "What did you do to her?" "What did we do?" Snake stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet. "Friend, we didn't lay a finger on that woman. That was all you." The reality of the situation began to penetrate Derek's alcohol-soaked brain. "You can't just break into my house. This is illegal. I'll have you arrested." "Illegal?" Preacher stepped out of the shadows, his voice carrying the weight of moral authority. "You want to talk about illegal? Let's talk about what you did to a woman half your size. Let's talk about what you did to a 7-year-old boy." Derek's face went white. "Marcus? Where's Marcus?" "He's safe," Bear said. "Safer than he's ever been in this house. Safe from you." In the kitchen, Tank stood up and gave Bear a subtle signal. Sarah Thompson was alive, but she needed medical attention. Her left arm was definitely broken, possibly her ribs as well. She was drifting in and out of consciousness, but she was stable. "Here's how this is going to work," Bear said, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. "You're going to sit there and listen. You're not going to move. You're not going to speak unless I ask you a question. Because your son, your 7-year-old son, just ran 3 blocks in his pajamas to find someone to save his mother's life." Let that sink in for a minute. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in his adult life, he was facing men who weren't intimidated by his size, his temper, or his reputation. "You know what your boy said to me?" Bear continued. "He said, 'My dad's hurting my mom again. Please, someone said you guys protect people.' Again. That word tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are." Outside, the sound of motorcycle engines began to fill the quiet neighborhood. Word had gone out on the Brotherhood network, and angels from 3 counties were converging on Elm Street. Not to participate, this was Bear's operation, but to show support. To send a message that this family was now under the protection of something bigger than Derek Thompson's fists. Derek heard the engines too. His eyes darted toward the window, where he could see the silhouettes of riders dismounting in his driveway, on his lawn, filling the street in front of his house. "How many of you are there?" he whispered. "Enough," Snake answered. "More than enough." Bear knelt down so he was eye level with Derek, the way he'd knelt down for Marcus an hour earlier. But where his voice had been gentle with the boy, now it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Derek Thompson, you're done. You're done hurting that woman. You're done scaring that boy. You're done pretending you're a man when you're nothing but a coward who beats up people who can't fight back. You can't threaten me," Derek said, but his voice cracked. "I know my rights." "Rights?" Bear's expression darkened. "You gave up your rights when you put your hands on a child. When you put a woman in the hospital. When you made a 7-year-old boy afraid to sleep in his own house." In the kitchen, Sarah Thompson's eyes fluttered open. She tried to sit up, but Tank gently restrained her. "Ma'am, Try not to move. You've got some injuries that need looking at. My name's Tank, and I'm here to help. Marcus, she whispered through swollen lips. Where's Marcus? He's safe, Tank assured her. He's the one who brought us here. Brave kid you've got there. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, relief, pain, and something else. Hope. For the first time in years, hope. Outside, the rumble of engines had grown to a thunderous chorus. Neighbors' lights were coming on up and down the street. Someone would call the police eventually, but that was part of the plan. The Hells Angels wanted witnesses. They wanted the whole neighborhood to see Derek Thompson's humiliation. Bear stood up and walked to the window. In the street, 90 Hells Angels sat on their bikes, engines idling, chrome gleaming under the streetlights. It looked like an army had descended on this quiet suburban street, which, in a way, it had. See that? Bear said to Derek. Every one of those men out there has a story. Most of them have been where your boy is right now, scared, helpless, watching someone they love get hurt. The difference is, nobody came to save them. But they're here now. For Marcus. For Sarah. To make sure this never happens again. Derek was shaking now, whether from alcohol withdrawal or fear. What? What do you want from me? Bear turned back to him, and for the first time, Derek saw something that chilled him to the bone. Not anger, not rage, but cold, calculating justice. What I want is simple, Bear said. I want you to disappear. The word disappear hung in the air like a death sentence. Derek Thompson's face went from red to white to green in the space of 3 seconds. You can't just make me disappear, he stammered. People will ask questions. I have a job. Friends. Friends? Snake laughed bitterly. You mean the guys at the bar who listen to you brag about keeping your woman in line? Those friends? Derek's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The truth was, he didn't have friends. He had drinking buddies, guys who tolerated him because he bought rounds when his paycheck came in. But friends? People who would miss him if he vanished? No. Bear pulled a chair over and sat down facing Derek, their knees almost touching. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, almost conversational. Let me explain something to you, Derek. See, I've been watching this neighborhood for a while now. I know which houses have problems. I know which men think they're kings of their little castles. And I've been waiting for someone to give me a reason to act. He gestured toward the kitchen, where Tank was carefully helping Sarah sit up against the wall, checking her pupils with a small flashlight. Your wife has 2 broken ribs, a fractured arm, and a concussion. Your son has finger-shaped bruises on his arms and shoulders that are at different stages of healing, which means this isn't the first time you've put your hands on him. So here's what's going to happen. Bear leaned forward, and Derek instinctively tried to push himself deeper into the chair. You're going to pack one bag, tonight. You're going to get in your car, and you're going to drive away from this town. You're going to find a new job, a new life, somewhere far from here. And you're never going to contact Sarah or Marcus again. Not a phone call, not a letter, not a birthday card. Nothing. You can't make me leave my own house. Derek protested weakly. Your house? Preacher stepped forward, his voice carrying the moral authority of a man who'd found redemption in the darkest places. Son, this stopped being your house the moment you turned it into a prison for that woman and child. From the kitchen came the sound of sirens in the distance. Someone had finally called 911. Bear smiled. That was part of the plan too. Derek, those sirens you hear? That's the cavalry coming. But here's the thing, they're not coming to save you. They're coming to arrest you. See, while we've been having this conversation, my brothers have been busy. Snake held up a small digital camera. Funny thing about modern technology. This little device has been recording everything we've found in this house. The blood on the kitchen floor. Your wife's injuries. The damage to the walls where you've thrown things. Even found some interesting items in your bedroom closet. Derek's face went ashen. In his closet, hidden behind old coats, was a collection of photographs he'd taken of Sarah after previous beatings. Trophies, he called them. Reminders of his power over her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You see, Bear continued, we're not here to beat you up, Derek. We're not here to torture you or kill you, though God knows you deserve it. We're here to give you a choice. He stood up and walked to the window. Again, where the red and blue lights of police cars were beginning to mix with the headlights of 90 motorcycles. Choice 1. You stay here. Get arrested for domestic violence, child abuse, and whatever else they find in your little trophy collection. You go to prison, where men like you don't tend to do very well, especially when word gets around about what you did to a kid. Derek shuddered. He'd heard the stories about what happened to child abusers in prison. Choice 2. You pack that bag I mentioned, get in your car, and disappear. Tonight. Right now. Before the cops get to the front door. But if I run, I'll look guilty, Derek said desperately. Bear's laugh was like winter wind through a graveyard. Son, you are guilty. The question is whether you want to pay for it in a cell or with your freedom. In the kitchen, Sarah Thompson was trying to speak to Tank, her voice barely above a whisper. Is he really going to leave? Is this really over? Tank nodded, his scarred hands gentle, as he checked the splint he'd made for her arm. Ma'am, I've known Bear for 15 years. When he makes a promise like this, it's made in blood. Your husband is never going to hurt you or your boy again. Outside, the first police car pulled up in front of the house. Officers got out, saw the army of motorcycles, and immediately called for backup. But they didn't move to disperse the angels, they just created a perimeter and waited. Time's up, Derek, Bear said. What's it going to be? Derek looked around the room at the faces surrounding him. These weren't just bikers, they were soldiers, men who'd seen real combat, real violence, real justice. And in their eyes, he saw his future if he stayed. If I go, he said, his voice breaking. How do I know you won't come after me anyway? Because, Bear said simply, once you're gone, you're not our problem anymore. But Derek, and listen to this very carefully, if you ever come back, if you ever try to contact Sarah, or Marcus, if we even hear a rumor that you're thinking about it, then we will come after you. And next time, we won't be offering you choices. The sirens were getting closer now. Derek could see the red and blue lights reflecting off the windows. Decide. Now, Derek Thompson, bully, abuser, coward, made the only choice his kind ever makes when faced with real consequences. He chose himself. I'll go, he whispered. I'll pack a bag and go. Tank, Diesel, go with him, Bear ordered. Make sure he only takes what he needs. Nothing that belongs to Sarah or the boy. As Derek stumbled upstairs to pack, Bear walked into the kitchen where Sarah Thompson was trying to process what was happening to her life. Mrs. Thompson, he said gently, kneeling beside her the same way he'd knelt beside her son. My name is Bear. Your boy Marcus came to us for help. Is he okay? She whispered through split lips. I was so scared Derek would find him gone, and he's safe. He's outside in our truck, with one of my brothers. Brave kid you raised there. Smart too. He knew exactly where to go for help. Sarah tried to smile, but it hurt too much. I tried to leave before. But Derek said he'd find us wherever we went. Said he'd kill us both if I ever tried to take Marcus away from him. That's not going to happen, Bear said with absolute certainty. Derek is leaving town tonight. He's never coming back. And if he's stupid enough to try, well, we'll be here. From upstairs came the sound of Derek throwing things into a suitcase. Tank and Diesel weren't just supervising, they were making sure he understood that this was permanent. No coming back for forgotten items. No second chances. I don't understand, Sarah said. Why are you helping us? You don't even know us. Bear was quiet for a moment, remembering another woman, another child, in a village outside Kandahar. A family he'd failed to protect because he'd followed orders instead of his conscience. Ma'am, sometimes you get a chance to be the person you wish had been there when you needed help. Tonight, we're that person for you and your boy. Outside, the police had set up a perimeter, but they weren't moving to intervene. The lead officer, Sergeant Martinez, had dealt with the Hells Angels before. He knew they weren't here to cause trouble, they were here to prevent it. 10 minutes later, Derek Thompson came downstairs carrying a single duffel bag. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but he was moving toward the door. "Wait," Bear said. Derek froze like a deer in headlights. "Before you go, you're going to do one thing. You're going to apologize. To your wife. For everything." Derek looked at Sarah, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and something else pity. Even after everything he'd done to her, she felt sorry for him. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better." She nodded once, not forgiving that would take time, but acknowledging. "Now get out," Bear said. "And remember what I told you." Derek walked to the front door, stepped outside into the circus of flashing lights and rumbling engines, and got into his car. As he drove away, 90 Hell's Angels watched him go, their engines revving in a farewell that sounded like a promise and a threat rolled into one. The police cars followed Derek's taillights until they disappeared into the night, making sure he actually left town. Sergeant Martinez, a 20-year veteran who'd seen every kind of domestic violence call imaginable, walked up to the front porch where Bear was standing. "You know I should arrest all of you," Martinez said, but there was no hostility in his voice. "For what?" Bear asked. "We haven't broken any laws. We came to help a family in distress, we called for medical assistance, and we persuaded an abusive husband to leave voluntarily." Martinez looked through the open door at Sarah Thompson, who was being examined by a paramedic. "Is that how you describe what happened here?" "That's exactly how I describe it, unless you have evidence to the contrary." The sergeant sighed. He'd been called to this address 4 times in the past 2 years. Each time, Sarah Thompson had refused to press charges, too scared of what Derek would do in retaliation. Now, with Derek gone and the victim finally safe, Martinez wasn't about to create new problems. "Just try to keep it legal next time," he said, walking away. Bear went back inside, where Sarah was being loaded onto a gurney. The paramedic, a young woman named Kelly, looked up as he approached. "She's going to be okay," Kelly said. "Broken arm, 2 cracked ribs, concussion. She'll need surgery on the arm, but nothing life-threatening. Can her son ride with her to the hospital?" "Family only," Kelly started to say, then looked around at the Hell's Angels filling the house. "But I suppose you guys are family now, aren't you?" Outside, Snake was sitting in the truck, with Marcus, who hadn't said a word since watching his father drive away. The boy was staring at the house, trying to process what had just happened to his life. "Is he really gone?" Marcus asked quietly. "Yeah, kid, he's really gone." "Forever?" Snake looked down at this 7-year-old who'd shown more courage than most adults ever would. "Forever." Marcus was quiet for another minute. Then, "Is my mom going to be okay?" "Your mom's tough. She's going to be fine. And you know what? She's going to be proud of you. You saved her life tonight." When Bear came out to the truck, Marcus looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than they had a few hours ago. "Mr. Bear? What happens now?" Bear knelt down beside the truck window. Now you get to be a kid again. No more being scared all the time. No more tiptoeing around your own house. No more protecting your mom from someone who should have been protecting both of you. But where will we live? Dad paid for the house." Bear smiled. "Don't worry about that. We'll figure it out." The ambulance carrying Sarah pulled away, escorted by 2 police cars and followed by a small convoy of motorcycles. Marcus rode in the lead car with Bear, his small hand dwarfed by the biker's massive one. At the hospital, the Hell's Angels waited. They filled the waiting room, these tough men in leather and patches, sitting quietly while a woman and child they'd never met before tonight underwent treatment. Nurses and doctors walked past, initially nervous about the presence of so many bikers, but soon realizing these were guardians, not threats. Dr. Williams, the emergency room physician treating Sarah, found Bear in the hallway. "Are you family?" he asked. "Close enough," Bear replied. "She's asking for her son, and she wants to thank whoever called for help." Bear nodded. "Doc, I need to ask you something. The injuries you treated tonight, was this the first time?" "Doctor." Williams shook his head grimly. "Based on what I've seen, I'd say Mrs. Thompson has been the victim of ongoing domestic violence for several years. Old fractures, scar tissue, The kind of injuries that come from repeated trauma. Will she be able to testify if needed? If her husband ever comes back and gets arrested? Yes, I've documented everything, taken photographs. But from what I understand, he's not coming back. No, Bear said quietly. He's not. When they brought Marcus in to see his mother, Sarah was awake, her arm in a cast but her eyes clear. When she saw her son, she started crying not from pain, but from relief. "Mama, are you okay?" Marcus asked, climbing carefully onto the hospital bed. "I'm perfect," she whispered, holding him with her good arm. "I'm absolutely perfect." Over his head, she looked at Bear. "I don't know how to thank you. Any of you." "No thanks needed," Bear said. "But I do want to talk to you about something. When you're ready to go home, you're going to find some changes." Sarah frowned. "What kind of changes?" Snake stepped forward. "Ma'am, while you were in surgery, we took the liberty of making some improvements to your house. New locks, security system, reinforced doors, also cleaned up the mess in the kitchen. And," Bear added, "Derek won't be making any more house payments. We've got a lawyer who's going to help you figure out the paperwork, but the bottom line is the house is yours now, free and clear." Sarah stared at them. "I can't accept that. I can't pay you back." "Nobody's asking you to pay anything back," Bear interrupted. "Sometimes people help because it's the right thing to do. No strings attached." Dr. Williams returned with discharge papers. "Mrs. Thompson, you're free to go home, but I want to see you back here in a week to check on the arm." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Marcus tugged on Bear's jacket. "Mr. Bear, are you going to come visit us sometimes? I want to show you my baseball cards." Bear knelt down one more time. "Marcus, anytime you need us, we'll be there. That's a promise. But more importantly, you don't need to be scared anymore. You can just be a kid." The convoy that escorted Sarah and Marcus home was smaller than the one that had arrived earlier, just a dozen bikes, but enough to make the statement. As they pulled up to the house on Elm Street, Sarah gasped. The front yard had been cleaned up, the broken fence repaired. New flowers had been planted in beds that hadn't seen care in years. The house itself looked different, fresh paint, new porch light, windows that sparkled clean. When did you?" she stammered. "While you were in surgery," Diesel explained. "Turns out when you've got 90 guys and nothing but time, you can get a lot done." Inside, the house was transformed. The kitchen had been completely cleaned and repainted. New appliances replaced the ones Derek had damaged. The living room had been rearranged, Derek's chair removed and replaced with a comfortable couch where a mother and son could sit together safely. But the biggest change was harder to see. It was in the air. The feeling of fear, of walking on eggshells, of never knowing when violence might explode was gone. In its place was something Sarah Thompson hadn't felt in years: peace. As the angels prepared to leave, Bear handed Sarah a business card with just a phone number on it. "Anything you need, anytime you need it," he said. "And Sarah, you're stronger than you know." Tonight proved that. After they were gone, Sarah and Marcus sat on their new couch, holding each other in the quiet house. For the first time in memory, the silence felt safe. "Mama," Marcus said sleepily. "Yes, baby. I like our new friends." Sarah smiled, tears running down her cheeks. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The morning sun painted the grass field behind the elementary school in golden light. Parents lined the bleachers, coffee cups steaming in the crisp air, watching their children play Little League baseball. Among them sat Sarah Thompson, her left arm completely healed, cheering as her son Marcus stepped up to the plate. 6 months had changed everything. Sarah had gone back to school, studying to become a nurse. The scholarship had come from an anonymous donor, though she suspected she knew which motorcycle club had funded it. Marcus was in therapy, learning to be a child again, learning that it was okay to make noise, to laugh, to take up space in the world. They'd never heard from Derek again. According to a private investigator, Bear had hired to keep tabs on him. Derek Thompson was working construction in Nevada, living alone in a studio apartment, drinking himself to sleep every night. He'd made no attempt to contact his former family, apparently understanding that his old life was permanently closed to him. As Marcus swung at the ball, connecting with a solid crack that sent it sailing over the infield, Sarah jumped to her feet cheering. The boy rounded first base, second base, sliding safely into third as the crowd erupted in applause. From the parking lot came the familiar rumble of Harley-Davidson engines. Sarah turned to see Bear and 3 other angels dismounting their bikes, carrying a cooler and a folding chair. They'd become regular fixtures at Marcus's games, self-appointed uncles who never missed an opportunity to cheer him on. "How's our boy doing?" Bear asked, settling his massive frame onto the bleacher beside Sarah. "3 for 3 today," Sarah said proudly. "Coach says he's got real talent." Marcus spotted them from third base and waved enthusiastically. Bear waved back, then leaned over to Sarah. "Got some news," he said quietly. "Derek filed for divorce. Papers came through yesterday. You're officially free." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a weight she hadn't even realized she was still carrying finally lift from her shoulders. "It's really over. It's really over." They watched as Marcus stole home, sliding safely across the plate as his teammates mobbed him in celebration. Sarah found herself crying again, but these were different tears than the ones she'd shed 6 months ago. These were tears of joy, of possibility, of a future she could finally imagine. After the game, Marcus ran over to the bleachers, still wearing his dirt-stained uniform, his face glowing with excitement. "Did you see that slide, Mr. Bear? Did you see it?" "I saw it, champ. That was Major League stuff right there." Marcus beamed, then his expression grew more serious. "Mr. Bear, I have something for you." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Bear unfolded it to find a drawing of child's artwork depicting a small boy, a woman, and several large men on motorcycles, all standing together in front of a house. At the top, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, Marcus had written, "My family." Bear stared at the drawing for a long moment, his throat tight with emotion. Around him, the other angels leaned in to see, their own eyes growing suspiciously bright. "Marcus," Bear said finally, "this is the best gift anyone's ever given me. You can hang it in the clubhouse," Marcus said, "so everyone knows we're family." As the crowd dispersed and families headed to their cars, Sarah walked beside Bear toward the parking lot. "I've been thinking," she said, "when I graduate from nursing school, I'd like to work with domestic violence victims. Help other women and children like Marcus and me." Bear nodded approvingly. "You'd be good at that. You know what it feels like. You know what it takes to survive. And to heal," Sarah added. "That's the part that took me the longest to understand. Surviving is just the beginning. Healing is the real work." They reached Bear's bike, where Marcus was already examining the chrome details with the fascination only a 7-year-old could muster. "Mr. Bear," Marcus said, "when I grow up, can I be a Hell's Angel too?" Bear knelt down to Marcus's level, his expression serious. "Son, you can be anything you want to be. Doctor, teacher, policeman, firefighter, anything. But if you decide you want to be a Hell's Angel, you come talk to me first. Because being one of us isn't about the bike or the patch or looking tough. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's dangerous. You think you can handle that kind of responsibility?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir. I want to help people like you helped us." "Then you're already halfway there, champ." As the angels fired up their bikes and prepared to leave, Bear handed Sarah a manila envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "College fund for Marcus. He's going to need a good education if he wants to change the world." Before Sarah could protest, Bear had started his engine and was pulling away, the rumble of his Harley drowning out her words of thanks. That evening, as Sarah tucked Marcus into bed in his clean, safe room, he looked up at her with the same serious expression he'd worn talking to Bear. "Mama, are you happy now?" Sarah smoothed his hair, thinking about everything that had led them to this moment. The fear, the pain, the desperate knock on a clubhouse door in the middle of the night, and the unlikely angels who had answered. "Yes, baby," she said. "I'm happy now." "Me too," Marcus said, settling into his pillow. "I like not being scared anymore." As Sarah turned off the light and headed toward her own bedroom. She paused at the window overlooking the front yard. In the distance, she could see a motorcycle parked at the end of the street, one of Bear's men, keeping watch, making sure they were safe. She tried to tell them it wasn't necessary anymore, that Derek was gone and they didn't need protection. But Bear had just smiled and said, "Family looks out for family. Always." 6 months ago, Sarah Thompson had been a victim, trapped in a cycle of violence with no way out. Tonight, she was a survivor, a student, a mother raising her son in a house filled with love instead of fear. And somewhere out there in the darkness, 90 Hell's Angels slept peacefully, knowing they'd kept their promise to a little boy who'd knocked on their door and asked them to be heroes. Sometimes salvation comes in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes angels wear leather jackets and ride Harley-Davidsons. And sometimes, when the world seems darkest, all it takes is the courage to knock on the right door and ask for help. The Brotherhood had answered that knock. And in saving a family, they'd saved a piece of themselves as well. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.